From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Tuesday the 24th of January 2023. Good afternoon. In today's Spotlight story, we run through why Finland may join NATO without Sweden. This isn't the only thing happening in the world though, so we'll run through three of today's other important stories. And in our exclusive Nebula section, we discuss the growing trade dispute between the EU and US. But first, why might Finland join NATO without Sweden? Finland and Sweden made headlines in May last year when they reversed decades-old policies and applied to join the NATO military alliance, prompted by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But the country's accession bids have hit a stumbling block, namely Turkey, that has seen their NATO ambitions fade further and further into the distance. Despite simultaneously handing in their application letters and effectively being treated as a joint bid, it has gotten to the point where Finland may have to consider joining NATO on its own, without Sweden. On Tuesday, Finland's foreign minister hinted at this, saying that while joint membership remains the first option, we obviously have to assess the situation. If something has happened, which means that in the long term, Sweden can no longer move forward. However, at this point, he said it's too early to tell. The last remaining barrier between the Scandinavian countries and NATO is Turkey, which, as a NATO member, has a veto over their entry. Turkey has reservations about Sweden and Finland from the start, but progress appeared to have been made last year in June. The countries signed a trilateral memorandum which was meant to avoid a Turkish veto by addressing President Erdogan's stated concerns about the activities of Kurdish militants and their affiliates in Sweden and Finland, which Erdogan described as a nesting ground. But this progress was short-lived, and on Monday, Erdogan cast serious doubt over Sweden's entry to NATO by saying that Sweden should not expect any support from Turkey regarding the NATO issue. This followed a series of events in Sweden that angered authorities in Ankara. These include the upside-down hanging of the mannequin representing Erdogan in Stockholm by a pro-Kurdish group, and most recently the public burning of a copy of the Quran by a far-right Swedish politician at a protest. Sweden's leaders condemned the acts, and Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson called the latter an act of sabotage against the Swedish NATO bid. Despite the government's condemnations, the actions are legal in Sweden, and they sparked protests and significant anger in Turkey. So, with Sweden's Prime Minister recently saying that Turkey is asking for things Sweden cannot give, increasing public opposition to Turkey in Sweden, Turkey saying Sweden shouldn't expect its support, and also key elections in Turkey just months away, it's clear that things aren't exactly on track. And it's no wonder that Finland might be considering dropping Sweden and joining NATO by itself. Finland's foreign minister said in an interview that a timeout is needed before we return to the three-way talks and see where we are when the dust has settled after the current situation. So no conclusions should be drawn yet. I think there will be a break for a couple of weeks, he added. We'll make sure to keep you updated as the story develops. Okay, so that's the biggest story of the day, but there's a lot more going on around the world, so here's a rundown of three other stories. While the war rages on in Ukraine, President Zelensky is trying to ensure that he sticks to his 2019 election pledge to try and deal with corruption in the country. It was revealed over the weekend that the Defence Ministry had been buying food for soldiers at inflated prices, which in turn raised questions about the government's procurement processes. It was also revealed at the weekend that anti-corruption police had detained the Deputy Infrastructure Minister on suspicion of receiving $400,000 to facilitate the import of generators into Ukraine in September. In a nightly address yesterday, Zelensky indicated that a reshuffle was imminent and that he would crack down on any corruption. Part of this will be toughening regulation on procurement and making prices public in times of conflict. Clearly, Zelensky doesn't want a repeat of this weekend's scandal. There's more on the way, but be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to make the daily briefing part of your daily routine, or just search for us on your podcast app to listen along. Prosecutors in Germany have charged 5 people with treason over an alleged plot to overthrow the German government by violent means, as well as planning to kidnap Health Minister Karl Lauterbach. The 5 are believed to have ties with the far-right Reichsbürger movement, which rejects the legitimacy of the modern democratic German state. Prosecutors say the group had a goal of triggering civil war-like conditions in Germany by means of violence, taking over the state and replacing it with an authoritarian system of government based on the model of the German Empire. 4 men were arrested in April 2022, and a woman identified as the ringleader was arrested in October. Another Reichsbürger-affiliated coup plot was disrupted in December last year, when about 25 people, including the self-styled Heinrich XIII, were arrested. The government of the West African nation of Burkina Faso has confirmed that it has terminated an agreement with France and asked French forces to leave the country, the latest country in the region to do so. Like other countries in the Sahel region, Burkina Faso has been plagued with violence from insurgent groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the so-called Islamic State group. A 2018 agreement allowed French troops to be stationed in the country to help with counterinsurgency. But this week, a government spokesperson said that it had asked its ex-colonial ruler to withdraw its 400-ish troops within a month. France's President Macron said he was awaiting clarification over the demand, to which Burkina Faso's government responded, "We don't see how to be more clear than this." A military junta rules Burkina Faso, led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who in September last year overthrew the previous military government, which itself overthrew the elected government a year ago, because of a failure to tackle the violent insurgency. Burkina Faso's government says it wants to be the prime actors in the recapture of our territory, and that this is not the end of diplomatic relations between Burkina Faso and France. In the final uplifting story today, we discuss algae being turned into plastic. Seaweed and microalgae, according to scientists, have been clogging up waters from the Caribbean to the Baltic. However, about 6 years ago, a Finnish biochemist started to try and tackle this problem and realised that the algae could be turned into cosmetics, human food, animal feed, and even a replacement for plastic. The business has attracted both commercial investment and European Union funds and is currently in the process of piloting a production scheme. They hope to be fully operational by 2025 to 2026. That's all we have time for on YouTube, but if you want to see our discussion of the growing trade dispute between the US and EU, then watch the extended ad-free edition of the Daily Briefing over on Nebula. Now might be the time to do it, as there's an offer which gets you a year of membership for less than $1 a month. That's huge because Nebula subscribers not only get everything you've already watched ad-free, but also an extended edition of the show every single day, available to watch on Nebula or stream on your podcast app of choice. They also get access to a ton of other exclusive ad-free TLDR content, as well as videos from all your favourite creators. The good news is, like I mentioned, our friends at CuriosityStream, the streaming service which offers you some of the world's best documentaries, is offering an incredible deal whereby you can get both platforms, CuriosityStream and Nebula, for less than $12 a year. That's all the documentaries you could want on CuriosityStream, and then more TLDR content on Nebula, including the extended briefing, other full exclusive TLDR videos, and it's always ad-free. Click the link below to get both services for less than $1 a month, a deal which doesn't last long, and support the channel.